Hello there. Hello, Mary and Evelyn and Kelly. And I think somebody called Shia. I haven't seen your name before, Shia. And if I hope I'm getting it right, when I start, I see the back of the camera and I see the names as they pop up. And then I come and sit down and I can't see them anymore. But I sometimes spot new names. If you're new, welcome. If you've been here before, sorry, I haven't noticed you, but this is Fireside Reading, where I'm Gildart and I sit in front of the fire every day at 5 and read a little bit of a lovely old book. And over the course of who knows how long, we read these great books together. There are many books that we've read together on the YouTube channel Fireside Reading. They're sitting there, and anybody who wants to can watch and listen to them in their own time. Here we read live every day at 5. I'm not going to be reading on Wednesday, and it's going to be a relatively brief reading today and tomorrow. Today, because it's quite a short chapter, and then tomorrow I'm going to start a chapter, and then we're going off to the theatre. We're going to see A Christmas Carol. So I will read for 15 minutes and then head off. So Christmas is coming. I love Christmas, and I hope you all are going to have a lovely Christmas. We are planning on doing so. We're currently reading A Passage to India, which is a book that I had always wanted to read but hadn't read. Now, thanks to Fireside Reading, I'm reading. And we are getting into the intricacies of what on earth is going on with Mrs. Moore and Adela. I don't completely understand it yet, but we shall see if we understand a little more after today's reading. Welcome to a Fireside Reading of A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. Chapter 23. Lady Mellanby, wife to the Lieutenant Governor of the province, had been gratified by the appeal addressed to her by the ladies of Chandrapur. She could not do anything. Besides, she was sailing for England, but she desired to be informed if she could show sympathy in any other way. Mrs. Turton replied that Mr. Heslop's mother was trying to get a passage, but had delayed too long, and all the boats were full. Could Lady Mellanby use her influence? Not even Lady Mellanby could expand the dimensions of a P&O, but she was a very, very nice woman, and she actually wired, offering the unknown and obscure old lady accommodation in her own reserved cabin. It was like a gift from heaven. Humble and grateful, Ronnie could not but reflect that there are compensations for every woe. His name was familiar at Government House, owing to poor Adela, and now Mrs. Moore would stamp it on Lady Mellanby's imagination as they journeyed across the Indian Ocean and up the Red Sea. He had a return of tenderness for his mother, as we do for our relatives when they receive conspicuous and unexpected honor. She was not negligible. She could still arrest the attention of a high official's wife. So Mrs. Moore had all she wished. She escaped the trial, the marriage, and the hot weather. She would return to England in comfort and distinction and see her other children. At her son's suggestion, and by her own desire, she departed. But she accepted her good luck without enthusiasm. She had come to that state where the horror of the universe and its smallness are both visible at the same time, the twilight of the double vision in which so many elderly people are involved. If this world is not to our taste, well, at all events there is heaven, hell, annihilation, one or other of those large things, that huge scenic background of stars, fires, blue or black air. All heroic endeavour and all that is known as art assumes that there is such a background, just as all practical endeavour, when the world is to our taste, assumes that the world is all. But in the twilight of the double vision, a spiritual muddledom is set up for which no high-sounding words can be found. We can neither act nor refrain from action. We can neither ignore nor respect infinity. Mrs. Moore had always inclined to resignation. As soon as she landed in India, it seemed to her good, and when she saw the water flowing through the mosque tank, or the Ganges, or the moon caught in the shawl of night with all the other stars, it seemed a beautiful goal and an easy one, to be one with the universe, so dignified and simple. But there was always some little duty to be performed first, some new card to be turned up from the diminishing pack and placed, and while she was pottering about, the Marabar struck its gong. What had spoken to her in that scoured-out cavity of the granite? What dwelt in the first of the caves? Something very old and very small. Before time, it was before space also. Something snub-nosed, incapable of generosity, the undying worm itself. Since hearing its voice, she had not entertained one large thought. She was actually envious of Adela. All this fuss over a frightened girl. Nothing had happened, and if it had, she found herself thinking with the cynicism of a withered priestess, if it had, there are worse evils than love. The unspeakable attempt presented itself to her as love. In a cave, in a church, boom, it amounts to the same. Visions are supposed to entail profundity, but wait till you get one, dear reader. The abyss also may be petty, the serpent of eternity, made of maggots. Her constant thought was, less attention should be paid to my future daughter-in-law, and more to me. There is no sorrow like my sorrow. Although when the attention was paid, she rejected it irritably. Her son couldn't escort her to Bombay, for the local situation continued acute, and all officials had to remain at their posts. Anthony couldn't come either, in case he never returned to give his evidence. So she travelled, with no one who could remind her of the past. This was a relief. The heat had drawn back a little before its next advance, and the journey was not unpleasant. As she left Chandrapur, the moon, full again, shone over the Ganges and touched the shrinking channels into threads of silver, then veered and looked into her window. The swift and comfortable mail train slid with her through the night, and all the next day she was rushing through central India, through landscapes that were baked and bleached, but had not the hopeless melancholy of the plain. She watched the indestructible life of man and his changing faces, and the houses he has built for himself, and God, and they appeared to her not in terms of her own trouble, but as things to see. There was, for instance, a place called Asir Gar, which she passed at sunset and identified on a map, an enormous fortress among wooded hills. No one had ever mentioned Asir Gar to her, but it had huge and noble bastions, and to the right of them was a mosque. She forgot it. 10 minutes later, Asir Gar reappeared. The mosque was to the left of the bastions now. The train, in its descent through the Vindhyas, had described a semicircle round Asir Gar. What could she connect it with except its own name? Nothing. She knew no one who lived there. But it had looked at her twice and seemed to say, "I do not vanish." She woke in the middle of the night with a start, for the train was falling over the western cliff. Moonlit pinnacles rushed up at her, like the fringes of a sea. Then a brief episode of plain, the real sea, and the soupy dawn of Bombay. "I have not seen the right places," she thought, as she saw embayed in the platforms of the Victoria terminus the end of the rails that had carried her over a continent and could never carry her back. She would never visit Asir Gar or the other untouched places, neither Delhi, nor Agra, nor the Rajputana cities, nor Kashmir, nor the obscurer marvels that had sometimes shone through men's speech, the bilingual rock of Girnar, the statue of Sri Belgola, the ruins of Mandu and Hampi, temples of Kajara, gardens of Shalimar. As she drove through the huge city which the West has built and abandoned with a gesture of despair, she longed to stop, though it was only Bombay, and disentangle the 100 Indias that passed each other in its streets. The feet of the horses moved her on, and presently the boat sailed, and thousands of coconut palms appeared all round the anchorage and climbed the hills to wave her farewell. "So you thought an echo was India. You took the Malabar caves as final," they laughed. "What have we in common with them, or they with Asir Gar? Goodbye." Then the steamer rounded Colaba. The continent swung about. The cliff of the Ghats melted into the haze of a tropic sea. Lady Mellanby turned up and advised her not to stand in the heat. "We are safely out of the frying pan," said Lady Mellanby. "It will never do to fall into the fire." Thanks, everyone, for joining me. More tomorrow. Another quick chapter, quick reading tomorrow at the same time, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram Live. And I will then not read on Wednesday, but resume on Thursday. Until I see you all tomorrow, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.